Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, come back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Camille Selvon Abrahams. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. I'm so excited to be here, Deborah.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Camille Selvon Abrahams. I am an animator by training, but I'm also the head of animation department at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And I run and founded the Animae Caribe Animation Festival, which is the longest running festival in the Caribbean for animation.
Wonderful. Can you get into the specifics of like what city or town are you from, and how was it growing up?
Okay, so I'm from the Caribbean. I do have family all over the world. So I have family in the US, I have family in the UK, in Europe. But I've decided to come back to Trinidad after I did about 10 years of study in London. So home, but a lot of the work that I do is really about getting animation and digital media on a whole to sort of on the islands, because it's something that is sort of left out. I am from Maracas Valley, which is a valley, as it says. I actually was born in Port of Spain, which of course is the capital, the center, but grew up all my life in a village, literally in a village. And I mean, where, it's small numbers, but also it's a community. My father was a school teacher. He became a school principal. He was an advocate for culture. He was an advocate for community. He fought in courts to make sure that young people get land. I mean, he was a community leader. So my entire childhood was my mentor being my dad, and seeing what the kind of things he had to do to get Caribbean islands, Caribbean people, and community to exist in this bigger globe. So my experience really was in a sort of village atmosphere, but then at what was my age? 24, I think. I left to go to London to study, and I spent 10 years there. The last 2 years was sort of back and forth. But I remember after doing my university study, which was at Goldsmiths University, I felt like I needed to go back home. And I experimented for a few years back and forth. And then eventually I decided to stay and live in Trinidad. And right now, Deborah, I'm proud to say I'm living on the mountains in the same village and doing what I can do to get, persons in the community to actually see what I do and see themselves in me.
So what would you say is the uniqueness of where you're from?
I think it's a melting pot of culture and people that is unique. And with that, there's a naiveness that I go into things with. And I was at Afro Animation Forum, and I spoke about that because it's my naiveness of thinking that, okay, everybody melts together, in a community, and therefore I dive into situations that I'm not really, aware of the political and social implications of doing that. But it's because of that naiveness that I probably get through, because they would be like, how dare she does that? What made her do that, And with that, people will respond. I would get, people who probably would not just go to a festival. They would come to my festival because I reach out. I'm like, hi, we have a festival in Trinidad. Would you like to come? And they were like, yeah, sure. And I'm talking, Disney and Pixar and you name it. So I think it's that naiveness. There's also something very special about island life. And a big advocacy. My work spans several things, and I guess we will talk about that. But one part of my work that I know I have to do is about reconnecting the diaspora, because we, as a Caribbean island, often are not in the conversations that, let's say, America is in when it comes to our ancestry and where we're from and slavery and everything else. But we are a huge part of that. We and I said it in the Afro Animation Summit, that whenever I speak on an American stage, I make sure to remind, my brothers and sisters in the audience, listen, we came off from the same ship, right? My ancestors are in America. My past, great grandfather happened to be pushed off while my great grandmother probably was put on an island in Grenada or Trinidad. So there is a connection that I don't think we fully get, and I also don't think we understand the power of that. So yeah, that's kind of
Yeah, you know, the phrase ignorance is bliss. I think that's a big thing about being the young, is that maybe since they don't know, there's like a lot of innovation and stuff like that. So I feel like for me, when I moved to South Korea and went to go teach English, I didn't know that, you know, oh, if you want to go in August, then you should start applying in March. I started applying in like May or June. So, but you miss out on opportunities by knowing information sometimes.
Yes. So it's so important, right?
Yeah. What is your favorite custom or tradition from your culture?
Very on the surface, which is Carnival, because it is one time when we have fun. There are challenges to living in the Caribbean, as it is in all the rest of the world. But during the Carnival period, it really is a time when everyone takes off their mask. It's like, you know, it doesn't matter what strata, what, you know, level of economic livelihood you have. We all get out in the streets and just hang out with each other for 3 days, non-stop, no sleep. Also, now what we're finding is that a lot of the diaspora, they're coming in for the carnival, so they too are experiencing that. And what we hear from our people, like those who are living in New York or living in Atlanta or wherever, it's like a breath of fresh air to come and just not do anything, not have the challenges of bills, and just let your hair loose, right? A hair down and just have fun. So for me, on the surface, it's a very important because we need it, but it's also a very important culturally that we keep that up. Because if you go back to that, Deborah, it actually was a revolt against slavery. Now, as much as it sounds like fun now, our ancestors then were revolting in the streets, and we were making mockery of the colonials by dressing up like them. And, you know, that was our way of kind of revolting. So there's some essence to that. So it's not just all fun and feathers and costumes. It's actually, you know, the ability to keep a tradition going.
Yeah, and Trinity Carnival is like one of the main ones that people try to go to every year. And I think there's a similarity. I lived in New Orleans before moving to LA, and like the Zulu crew, you know, sometimes get judged for dressing in the blackface, but that is also to mock.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, those sort of methods we had to use.
So we have a very famous writer, no longer with us, called C.L.R. James, and he wrote a book called Beyond the Boundaries, and it is about cricket. And what he was saying is, our time, during the colonial time, cricket was a sport that was used to beat the masters, to beat the colonials, because it was the only way we could have beat them, right? We were being beaten in all different ways. So therefore, things like carnival, things like cricket are more than just celebration for us. It is revolt that and methods that we had to use that was a little bit underhanded in order for us to survive, you know, because this was a tough time. Yeah.
Was it Trinidad that beat England in cricket one time or something?
Yeah. I mean, we do it often. I mean, the younger generation now, you know, it's not so, you know, it's a proper fight between the two. But yeah, especially in the 70s, 60s, we would be, the West Indies, they would call us then, which is the Caribbean, would be winners, you know, most of the time. Yeah.
So what would you say is your favorite custom or tradition from your family growing up?
Whew, that's an interesting one. So again, it has to do with tradition, and this would be like Christmas time. So my experience with Christmas is in the UK, when I lived in the UK, and of course in the Caribbean. And in the UK, Christmas tradition, from my experience, was you buy gifts, you put it under the tree, and then you open the gifts, right? That was my understanding. And in Trinidad and the Caribbean, it's about music, it's about dance, it's about going to other people's homes. It's what's about going to 3 o'clock in the morning and knocking on people's doors and saying, I'm coming here to you, and you have to open the door whether you like it or not, because it is a tradition, right? I mean, at that time, it was safe and stuff to do those things. But again, it was because of the fact that we were also a melting pot, because that tradition during Christmas was based on our sort of Spanish influence, because we play a music called parang. So during Christmas time, we play a music called parang, which was the Spanish influence, and the community will come together. So we would go to different houses, all from morning to night into the next morning. And when they come to your house, you bring out all the alcohol that you have, all the meat that you have, and every house celebrated everybody. And that would happen throughout the community. So I actually have memories of me being 11, 12 years old with my father and my grandfather paranging. And I'll never forget that, because both of them are no longer with us, with me. But that memory comes up every Christmas.
Sounds like a wonderful memory. So what was your journey in art and animation during your childhood?
That's a good question. So, I mean, you would learn a lot about the Caribbean experience in this podcast, and I'm hoping people appreciate that, right? Because it's about uniqueness and bringing diversity to the table now. So, my experience as a child was that I always loved drawing, like that from ever since I knew myself, right? And my father was a teacher, as I said before, and he would bring chalk. So I don't know if you all know, what chalk. I mean, it's not used in schools now, but it was used
when I was a child.
Right, right. So chalk in his pocket. So he would come home with chalk, and I would take that chalk and I would draw wherever, in the back of furniture, on the walls, you name it. I would be drawing with that. And I remember my first animated character I drew was Fred Flintstone. So I worked out his because he has a very basic style that you could replicate. His hair is a basic shape, and around the neck has a basic thing. And I would draw that over and over and over until I perfected. So that was my sort of beginning, in the sense that I knew I wanted to do this thing. And I didn't know what it was, because, again, with a little history about the Caribbean, we did not have animation on the curriculum until, and that will come back to something we will probably discuss, because the first time it was brought in the curriculum was when I brought it back. So it became on the curriculum in Trinidad and Tobago when I brought it on the curriculum. So I didn't know that what I was doing was character design that could then go into animation. I just thought I was drawing in the back of furniture with my father's chalk. So that was the beginning. And then when I went into high school, I did art as a career. But something to explain to you and the audience, and I don't know if you experienced this in the US, but during my time, and my time is way back, I'm not a spring chicken, we did not have, art was not considered a career. Art was not considered something that a child would take as a main thing. It was sort of a side thing. So I passed for a very prestigious school, and art was a sort of a side thing. And it would be good to have a conversation with you, Deborah, to see if you experience this, because I feel a little bit of me in you from what you said earlier, right? I wanted to do physics. Like, that's crazy. All right. I wanted to do physics and I wanted to do art. But because at that time they felt that is just not gonna mix. So you have a choice. You have 12 subjects to take, but art and physics does not mix. That no. Do art and social studies or geography and English. Physics goes with chemistry and maths and whatever, right? And so I loved physics, and I now realize why. But but I was pushed into that space where it was art, right? So I couldn't do physics. But what I had a wonderful art teacher who kind of pushed me. And then when I left, I did commercial, what we call commercial art. Now it's graphic art. And there was a really interesting story because I didn't know about animation. I really didn't know about animation. When I went to London, I met my husband, ex-husband, but husband then, in Trinidad, and we decided to go to London to live. So I always knew I wanted to study further. And when I got to the university, Goldsmiths University, I mean, I was so naive, Deborah. I'll tell you many naive stories, right? But
yeah,
I was so naive, right? So I lived in East London. And that, again, is telling you that naiveness is what probably got me here. I lived in Broccoli, and I was like, I want to go to university, but I don't want to travel far. That was not like, okay, I want to go to a university that does this. I was like, no, I want to go where I don't have to travel. and closest to me was Goldsmiths University. So I said, okay, I'm going to apply. And I got in. And only to find out years after that is one of the top media universities in London.
Happy accidents.
It's my naiveness, right?
Yeah.
Right. But when I got there, I wanted to do music videos. So I said I'd do film. And again, it's because I wasn't exposed to animation in my country. I just didn't know what that was about. So I did my first year, we did teasers, we did journalism, we did photography, we did, we didn't even do digital yet. We did film, a bit on film, and we did a bit on animation. And so I went in there saying, I'm going to do film and I'm going to do music videos. And the moment I touched animation, I just switched.
Yes,
I was like, oh my God, this is me, you know? And it's also one of the reasons why I do what I do, because how many of me were there in the Caribbean that they know they have a love for something, but because it's not in the curriculum, they will never explore it. They will never even think that they could do it because it's just not on the curriculum.
Right.
So that's how I got into it. I did my 4-year degree program there. My film went on and won the Royal Television Society Award in London for the best film, for the best student film. Again, very, very naive about that. I just threw my film in. Right. And then I won. And when, they told me I had to come to the award ceremony with all the other universities. And when they called my name, I was kind of like looking back to see, is it me? Because it was never in my head that I would win. Right. And it's quite a prestigious award. But again, it's stories like this. As you said in the beginning, this is about sharing experiences so people who feel that they can't do things could see that they could do things. So that was my experience of where I came from to where I am now.
Yeah, like I always got good grades, but science wasn't really my thing. It was math, and so I wanted to be an engineer, an electrical engineer. And so when I did dual enrollment, where I took classes at a community college while I was in high school, I took 7 classes. Those were mostly art classes. So I took like Photoshop, Illustrator, things that don't exist anymore, Dreamweaver, like Flash and stuff like that. But the 7th class was 3ds Max. And so I felt like with 3D, particularly I'm professionally a modeler, it was like the perfect meld of my like analytical and creative brain.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then there's this conversation in the Black community in America where it's like, oh, why didn't you go to a historically Black college or university instead of like a PWI, predominantly white institution? And it was like, because I'm not like my peers. Like I watched Disney and Warner Brothers, but I
Mm-hmm.
never was like, oh yeah, I could do that. Like I'm just like,
Yes.
oh cool, like I'm just gonna go do this math now. And so I didn't find animation till my senior year of high school.
Right.
And so like, you know, if I wanted to go like the HBCU route, I could have been like, all right, I'm a major in film or art and then do this. I didn't have time. I need to major in animation.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
I don't got time to figure it out. It took me so long to figure it out. I just need somebody to tell me what to do.
Right. Exactly. Because once you're in it and you understand the beauty of it, you're in it, you know, there's no turning around, you know. So good for you.
So you did say that your dad would bring you chalk and stuff like that. So do you feel like your parents were very supportive of your artistic interest?
Yes, that was a big thing, and that was a challenge in the Caribbean also, because we have a very old school, or had, we're trying to change it a bit now, but a very old school colonial, with, you know, based on that kind of colonial context, you know, that maths is important. Yes, we know science important. The careers are medicine, engineering. Those are the careers that they push students for. So therefore, a parent having that understanding that art also is important was really, really important for my career and all my siblings. So what you find now is that all my siblings, and I have 6, I have 5, I'm in the middle, all of them are well balanced. So some would have gone on and do engineering, some would have gone on and do whatever. But because of the fact that our parents were giving us the opportunity to express ourselves through whatever, allowed us to be balanced human beings. And I think that is kind of missing.
Yeah. Something else that I want to mention, like when I was teaching high school, I was teaching Blender. And so that gave me a lot of time because that's a daily class, not nothing like college, which is just once a week. So I discovered like a way to use like math functions in Blender, and I would love to create like a math course using Blender, because I loved math, but a lot of people struggle with math. And if you could use like 3D and you can like put in these functions, but you can make it look, you can put it in an animation software. I think it will like help people, you know, understand parabolas and all that type of stuff. So
absolutely. And I think people like yourself and myself, I'm not saying it's rare. It's just, it's rare for, I think the institutions don't pull that out. That because I totally agree with you. Different people learn differently. And if you teach someone, like even, I have a great closeness to autistic people who are wanting to be in animation, right? So a lot of my students are on the spectrum, and we teach them differently. You don't teach them the same way that you teach in the classroom when it comes to certain things, like the technical things. And if you could take that information that you just spoke of and break it down visually, those kind of persons on the spectrum, or even those who learn differently, will get it. They will get maths. They will understand it because it's being taught in a different way. And it's unfortunate, but our education system is kind of set in a box. I mean, we are trying these days to kind of get away from that, but still, we have a long way to go.
And I think being able to interact with people who are like neurodivergent, like provides you with a lot of understanding and patience. Because my brother, we didn't know his entire life, because, you know, he was born in the 80s, so autism wasn't always a label to be applied. So we used different words, but we found out when he was like 21 that he was autistic. And it's like, for me to have the bias of having a brother, it's like when I see people who behave differently, I don't just automatically think it's anything crazy. It's just like, okay, that person is different. Like, does nobody else notice this? Or like, I wonder what other people's experience is, because it's just like so obvious to me. But I have a bias because I have this understanding of like living with someone who is different. And so, and then I did tutor a young man in high school. At the time, you know, it was called Asperger's, but that's not a word that we use in the States anymore. But yeah, I had like a lot of patience, because like sometimes his parents would come home and he'll be playing like the same. He like to play like the anime music over and over again, or the 2-hour anime music on YouTube. And I'm like, whatever makes him comfortable. And then his parents would come home like, oh, why are you playing that stuff? I'm like,
Yes.
I don't care.
Yeah.
As long as he's comfortable, I don't care.
Yeah, and also too, I think a lot of, especially young men, and maybe even I would go as far as say as young Black men, are misunderstood because of this, because you'd have a lot of young Black men on the spectrum, but because of our social situation and, you know, things that are going around in the house, they are not able to articulate that this is what it is, right? So the parents don't understand it, even the young men don't understand it. But when you take these young people, I would go to young people because it's both men and women and everybody else on that space. Yeah. When you go into the classroom and you have a young person not looking you in the eye. Yeah. And if that's person,
particularly in a traditional Black culture.
Right? Look me in the eye. Look me in the eye when you speak to me. And I know that persons with, you know, challenges, that is one of the things. They won't want to look you in the eye. Yeah. So therefore, what is that read as? That is read as being rude. That is read as being disrespectful. Yeah. That is read as being you don't care for, you know, your elders, or you don't, you know, but when you put that into a sort of a socio-cultural context with young Black men, that is a problem. Yeah, that is a problem, right? Because immediately they would be thrown into that space where they're being seen as disrespectful, when often it is to do with that, and even mental health issues, which is another whole discussion. So yeah, I mean, I could talk forever about this because I experience with my students. So you know, over the years of teaching, there's so much that I learned from them.
Yes. Something I learned on TikTok University through the hashtag autism, which is a hashtag for Black people with autism. Like a lot of things, particularly you know, I'll go from a Black American perspective, but it also happens in the diaspora. It's like a lot of ways that Black girls got in trouble for like, having an attitude or something like that. It actually was them being overstimulated. And so with Black girls, they don't get diagnosed with autism because they're really good at masking. And so you won't be able to see it as easily with Black girls. Or if they had the nails and they were tapping on the table, that might have been them like stimming. And so there's like these stereotypical Black things that you just think are like ghetto or something, but it was actually the autism or the ADHD.
Yep. But do we speak about that enough? You know, that's another thing.
Yeah. So what projects have you gotten to work on throughout your career?
Right. So there's quite a few. Yeah. There's some that are social. So I'll start with the social and then I'll talk about the fun stuff. I mean, the social is fun too, but you know, it takes a lot more work and it takes a lot more energy. But something that I'm very, very proud of is taking animation and making it a way for persons to express themselves, right? So that's a big thing for me. So there is a project we do called the Shift Project. And I call it the Shift Project because if you type on a computer and you keep typing and you type A is a E, E is a E, but when you press Shift, it becomes something else, right? So I kind of based that on the fact that we can create change, but in order to create change, you can't be doing the same thing over and over, right? You have to do it differently. So it was called the Shift Project, and the Shift Project basically was about me and my team and the Animae Caribe team thinking, how can we impact persons who are at risk through not just animation but digital media? And we came up with the idea that maybe we could try going into prisons, right? And doing workshops in prisons. Again, my naive self, right? Never did it. Never had experience in prison reform or anything, but I just felt, let's go into prisons. And but we ended up in prisons because what happens, right? So, but we, you know, we worked with psychologists, we worked with teachers, and we came up with a sort of curriculum. And I'm also a curriculum developer, so I know what that is. That didn't just take the young men because we did the prisons for boys first, and then did it somewhere else for girls. So we said we would use the whole concept of writing stories for them to then express through animation. So it wasn't just going in there, showing them how to use the software and telling them do something. It was going through the process of writing, discussing the story arc, the hero's journey, what that is about, why the story starts this way, why there's shifts in between, and so that they understand the breakdown of the hero's journey, because the hero's journey is a phenomenal thing when you fully understand it, right? And so we went into the prisons. We started with 10 young men. They call them lads at the YTC, which is the Youth Training Center in Trinidad and Tobago. And so we had 10 lads do the workshop with us. And when we got in there that morning, there were 3 or 4 outside, kind of like, listen, we want to do this. We know we only have 10 computers, but we really want to do this. So I spoke to security and the persons in charge, and I said, let them share a computer with 4 others, and I will kind of pivot a little bit with how I present, and they could participate. So but that showed me that there's an interest. And you know, there's an interest, you know, they so wanted to get in. So when we started off with that story arc, and I went through the whole thing about telling a story, and I said, let's start telling stories after the exercise. And the kind of stories that I got, I couldn't, you know, you can't put that out there. But it was important for them to talk about it, because they talked about abuse, they talk about gun violence, they talk about sexual abuse, they talk about incest, all the horrible things, right, that they obviously experience. And then what I had to do now is kind of take that back in and say, all right, okay, we hear you. We hear you. We know that this is your reality. But if you're somebody else out there who, like yourself, experiencing the same thing, is that a story you would want to tell? Or is there a way to tell the story where there's hope? And then we went back to the drawing board, and we got stories about family, we got stories about education, we got stories about, you know, totally shifted their whole perspective on life, right? I mean, for a moment probably, but they did. So they broke that down into stories, and we came up with about 6 animated shorts that we pulled together. Very rough, huh? It's not, you know, mind-blowing or anything. But within 2 days, we had how many stories that we could have then put into one film, and it went on to win the Animae Caribe Award for most promising animator that year.
Because you mentioned the hero's journey, but also when we were on the panel in Baltimore, Maryland, you kind of mentioned the hero's journey and, you know, how to tell stories in the Caribbean way.
So I did a TED talk regarding the hero's journey, because what I felt was that my experience as a Caribbean person somehow doesn't fit the model, the hero's journey model well. So yes, it works, right? We all know that the hero's journey works. I mean, that's a tried and tested thing. But my experience in the Caribbean was like, who are our heroes, right? Sometimes you have situations where you are in a community where what you consider the bad guy is the hero. We also have a tradition of storytelling where it is about finding a way to survive. And if you find a way to survive, sometimes it means breaking rules, right? And in the traditional setting, the one who break the rules are not the heroes, right? So my experience there was like, I can't always tell that perfect hero's journey. I have to kind of express my journey where the hero, and I will go as raw as saying, sometimes even like, let's say in communities where they are drug dealers or whatever.
Yeah.
Even the drug dealers sometimes for certain people are the heroes. I mean, I'm not saying it's the right thing.
During Thanksgiving.
Yeah, right? So we've had some fun projects also. So for instance, we have a project that we worked with a local, what we call soca artist. Soca is a Caribbean genre of music, called Marshall Montano. And he did a book called Boy and the Magic Drum. And he came to us about getting that into an animated series. So we haven't completed it. In fact, we've only just started. But taking a cultural icon like that, who wrote his stories and taking it to the next stage, was really exciting. And what made it even more exciting was that our students were involved in the process, because I feel strongly that even how you teach students now needs to be a little bit different, not a little bit, a lot different. And, you know, sort of throw them into that process of communicating, you know, meeting clients. So he became the classroom's client. So they were all, you know, fanboying over him. But they were able to communicate and present their ideas to a client, being, you know, a very successful musician. And then he would give feedback, and then they would go back, work on it. And that gave them a sort of a studio type experience. It wasn't just about the animation. It was about creating characters, design the characters, doing site visits for backgrounds and environments. So we took them onto different parts of Trinidad and Tobago to see, you know, okay, oh, look at this background, you know, for that particular scene, you know, or the village that it's in. And they had that whole experience of seeing that animation and art is not just about the classroom, right? It really, really is more than that. You have to come out of the classroom. And especially, Deborah, with what is going on with AI, right? You know, they are going to tell stories now, right? So you prompt and they're going to tell our story. So what do we as artists, as designers, as people of color can put into that, because we can't run away from it. It is happening, to distinguish it, also to authenticate it, because it will be a replication of what the they think our story is, not what our true stories are. So we have to take people out of the classroom in order to get that. And that's what we did with this project. We took them out of the classroom. We got them to meet the client. They were able to present. That's another thing too. Because of what is going on with technology and the fact that we are becoming so much more insular, and we are on our own a lot more now. We're working from home. Students are working from home. We are not interacting with people. So that old, I would say, skill set of presenting your ideas to a group of people, that's being lost, right? Because you're behind the screen. So they were able to present the ideas, they were able to get feedback, they were able to then make those changes and then present something in the end. So I'm excited about that project and other projects like that, because that's a particular subject in our curriculum called Studio Practice, where we actually have real projects coming out of it. And the great thing is that they are cultural projects that are specific to our experience, but it's broad enough to be enjoyed by everyone. It doesn't matter what part of the world you are. When you hear these stories, you will enjoy them because they have a universal appeal.
Yeah. Just to mention really quickly, like I interviewed Cabello out of South Africa, and she has these lives on YouTube, and she had a live for Kenyan animation professionals. And a point that one of the guys made was like, oh, you know, we're worried about AI, but AI has nothing to take from us because none of our stuff is on the internet to take. So we have to we would have, like, as Kenyans, we have to put it out there.
Yeah.
Get taken.
yeah. If not, I mean, what they will make it up, right? Which is what is that worse, that they will make up your stories for you if you're not out there. So it's a sort of a double-edged sword, I think. You know.
You can keep going.
All right. Another good project. Okay, so this one was particularly interesting because we got some interest from the Inter-American Development Bank. That is the university program, right?
Mm-hmm.
They came to me. I had to present some options for funding, right? There was some money that, you know, they said, okay, we could put it into funding some projects at the university. And I did a bit of research before, because I feel like if you're getting funded, it just shouldn't be to fund something. You should find a problem. Okay. What is the problem, right? So when I dig deep with the program, the problem that we were having, or the challenge that we were having, was that the students that were coming out of the program, when they come out there in the real world, they just did not have that same thing, that studio experience, interacting with people, things like that. So we developed a project called Tap Factory, which is Trinidad and Tobago Animation Production Factory, where integrated in the school system is a studio, a simulation of a studio with all of the relevant things, the software, the hardware, the you know, all the bits and that are needed to create a studio, and where the classroom can actually happen in there, but with actual real jobs coming in. So you would have a core. We started with a core of our top students that graduated, and from there we had actual classes happening in that space. And so right now, that project, we are actually doing paid work with the graduates that are coming out, and the students are learning from that experience. So they will get to work on actual animated pieces. If it works, you know, it goes in. If not, of course, they have to learn from it. And then they could be employed if they want to be employed in the project after. That was a game changer, because then it showed us what were the challenges and what we needed to do in order to make this a sector in the Caribbean, right? It meant that investment needed to happen for this sort of career to blossom in the Caribbean. Investment needs to happen so that you have studios. Yes. If you don't have the studios with the appropriate software, appropriate hardware, then it just won't happen, right? Yeah. So either that, or you create. I must say though, that happened during COVID, and we just happened to have mobile units, which meant that they could have worked from home. Yeah. And therefore, this model that is now occurring, where they're working from home but still in the studio and back, COVID actually prepared us for that, right? So that's quite a success story, and we have some offshoots from that now where we're doing it. We a small studio was created in Tobago. We're looking at a studio in Suriname. So it really had an impact, a very, very positive impact on the sector in Trinidad and Tobago.
Nice. So what would you say you love about animation?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me think of it. I think what I love about animation is the ability, well, several things, but the ability to see your art in motion. And when I say art, it doesn't necessarily mean your illustration that you drew. It could be that, you know, if I'm a 3D artist or 3D designer, the fact that I could create something three-dimensionally and then I can make it move. It brings another level of beauty to what art is. I also like the fact that persons like myself could know who probably would challenge in communication. For me, I was very introverted. Nobody will think that because I'm talking so much, but I was very introverted. And I noticed that with my students, most of them are very introverted. So the fact that animation could now provide a career for persons like me, to me, that is one of the most beautiful things about it. The fact that it could create a career for persons on the spectrum, a beautiful, beautiful outcome of what this is. So I think that's it. It just kind of gives artists an opportunity to be and exist in this space.
let's see. So, so back in 2015, I remember trying to help out with the Kingstown Animation Festival. And so I'm sure things have like in the Caribbean have expanded a lot since then. What can you speak to like the what's the word I'm trying to use? The landscape in the Caribbean right now as far as animation?
That's a great question again. The landscape. So I would compare other areas and how animation evolved in other countries, in other spaces when I talk about this, because it's interesting. It's very interesting. So if we look at, for instance, India, my understanding is that India took about 12 to 15 years to get to where it is.
Yeah.
And the Caribbean, I would say, doing this probably about 20 years. The challenge that the Caribbean has is that we are small islands separated by water, one. Right. Two, we have a colonial sort of past that, you know, there are certain challenges embedded in society where there are challenges with access. There are challenges with certain sectors of society not having the funds to do what they need to do. There are challenges where even in the university spaces, the education spaces does not really allow us to fully go into sectors like animation, right? There's not the infrastructure there. Yeah. So 20-something years ago, you know, we started to see some changes. Me coming back, I saw some really good animators that were trying the years before, but we only really started to take animation seriously about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Prior to that, it was not seen as something serious. Yeah. And on top of that, in a situation like in Trinidad and Tobago is fine with oil and gas. It's like, we don't have an issue, we have oil and gas, right? So you now come in to say, well, animation is a multi-billion-dollar industry. That doesn't, you know, there's not an urgency there. So I say that to say that we as a Caribbean have come a long way when it comes to animation, but we still have a very long way to go to get it to be where it's at. But because of the fact that the technology is evolving quite fast and things are getting easier, and it is being recognized, especially the creative sector in the Caribbean is being recognized as very important. It means that we will get there. But I'm being honest, there are challenges in getting there. So Trinidad did a good job. We are moving, our institutions are taking it up seriously, we're getting funded. Jamaica also is trying their best to kind of get there, and they're doing a good job of it. Suriname is doing that, Guyana is doing that, but there are other small islands that just doesn't have the infrastructure to make that work. But we're going to change that. You know, again, my naive thinking is that, right, we're gonna do it one island at a time, and we will get there.
You're the founder of the Animae Caribe Animation and New Media Festival. Where did this idea start from, and how has it grown over the years?
So Animae Caribe Festival started from a very, I would say, selfish space. I had returned from London to Trinidad and Tobago, and I basically was, you know, I'm like, I need to find a way to stay here. I don't want to be jumping back on a plane. And then when I sort of was talking about animation and going to different spaces and saying, this is so fabulous, let's bring it in the schools, and people were looking at me like, you know, what are you talking about? Is it puppets? Is it, you know, what, you know, this doesn't make sense, right? And honestly, that's what I got. And I think what threw me off to start thinking about the festival was that I went I was so excited to open a studio when I got back. I was like, okay, let me go to the bank and let me see if I could, you know, get a loan and start a small studio. And the studio manager said to me, so what exactly? Tell me exactly what you're going to put on the shelf. What is going on the shelf? And when she said that, I was like, okay, there is some education to happen before I even do anything, because people are not understanding the power of it, how lucrative an industry it is, and how important it is for us. So that was the premise. And also on top of it, I didn't want to go back to London. So I said, I have to do something to get people to, you know, let's get people to understand what this is. And that is where the festival came from. And then when we saw after like 10 years, we were getting young persons to show us things that they were doing, even though we didn't have anything in schools, right? They were using their phones. They were using their phones, and they would come and say, look what I did with animation. Look what I did with Maya. Look what I did with, you know. And we felt like, okay, listen, we need to speak to the academics. This has to be on the school curriculum. We cannot not have digital media, animation, gaming on the school curriculum for our young people. This is their language, right? So from the festival, it grew into that thing where we needed to bring it on the curriculum so that the young people that were coming to the festival could know that they could study it properly. And a few years with the universities, eventually they took me seriously, and I was hired to create the first program in animation at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, which was a diploma. That was in 2008. And then in 2018, we created our first BFA in Digital Media Arts with specialization in animation, gaming, and music technology. So the festival is what sort of built the industry. I say that to people and they don't, because people don't understand, again, the importance of festivals, right? Almost every country that has a successful animation industry has animation festivals attached to it, right? So it goes hand in hand, and it actually fed the sector in the Caribbean, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but in the Caribbean, because we have Jamaicans participating, persons from Suriname, Guyana, Barbados, you know, so it's a Caribbean regional festival.
And because I just want to mention this phrase, so I guess I'll introduce it in this way. I feel like everything that you're explaining is the reason why you're called the mother of Caribbean animation. I
am. And at one point I was like, oh my God, what does that mean? You know, what a responsibility, you know? But I've actually embraced it. I have embraced it because one woman in this field is a rarity, right? You know what I'm saying. It is a rarity. And therefore, if I could do my part to kind of push other women out there, it's important. And having that kind of role, even if it's just a, you know, a label, it means that more women are looking at animation because I am there in the Caribbean, right? And also I am able to make an impact in the classroom. So I will give you some data. When we started the animation, we had like 85% of the animation students were men, 15% women. And over time, I felt like we needed to create that parity. It can't be that, you know. So I worked with several organizations. I worked with Microsoft Girls in ICT. I would do sessions in schools. Animae Caribe will focus a lot on female digital artists, animators, etc. And then now I could boast of a 45% female to 55% male ratio at the university. And the young women are killing it. They are coming out with some, oh my God, you know. So I eventually embraced it. I'm a humble soul. So I was like, at the beginning, like, and then too, it sort of aged me like, mother, okay. But I embraced it. And I wear it proud, you know, I wear a proud badge.
Obviously, a lot of people are humble, and what is the difference between trying to kind of thwart and get away a label like that and then leaning into it? What is the power of leaning into something? Because you are doing magnanimous things, but that humbleness sometimes can keep us back a little bit. So what is the multi-pronged importance of leaning into stuff like that?
Oh, you have some questions, girl.
That was off the top of my head.
No, because it's so important, because we often as women, and we're not going into that kind of conversation, which is nice, we are taught to be like that, you know. Listen, that's your job. You're supposed to be a mother, father, go for the groceries, do the medicals, do everything, and be that's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. So we kind of taught that. Even from toys we were given, you know, we were given, you know, toys that was like that. And I had to make a switch, because that could also kill you. That could mentally, you know, that could affect your mental health. Let me just put it that way, because you feel like I'm supposed to do this, and therefore I will do everything to make sure I do it. So how I leaned into it was to empower myself, because I could tell you, Deborah, this is not an easy journey. It was not an easy journey. I've had to deal with misogyny on a level that I cannot tell you how it affected me. In fact, it affected me physically, like literally, you know, hives coming out. I mean, that misogyny was crazy. And it was all because I was just trying to lead. As a woman, I need to lead. And if I have a job to lead, right? If that is my role to lead, I want to lead. But if you are not being allowed to lead, and you know that is your job, of course that will, you know, affect your. So what I had to do to lean into it is, one, assert my power without falling into the stereotype, right? And that too is another thing, because I've been told by persons like mentors. I've had many mentors, which is always good. Anybody who's listening there, if you get a mentor, that's great. And I remember one female mentor who's a lot older than me said, you can't show your emotions when you're in the room, you know, when you're in the boardroom. Don't do that, you know. And at first I was like, okay, I will do that. And then I realized that my emotions, my strength, my emotion, what you're calling emotion, is my passion.
Right.
That is totally different to someone being emotional or sensitive. It's like, if you're in my way and I have a job to do, you need to get out. So that's not emotion. That's my passion. You need to get out of the way. I have work to do. I was given a, you know. So it is understanding that in the boardroom, we are supposed to not be emotional like the guys. And what you need to do is put a block around you. That will work in some instances, but often it doesn't work. And you're treated the same way. So really, it's about balancing that. How I lean into it is balancing it. You need to hear my truth. My truth you may not be comfortable with it, but in order for us to do this, understand where I am. Also, we cannot look to be brought to the table if there isn't room for us, right? So if there's room in a space for us to be brought to the table, good. But if there isn't room, because that's a situation that often happens, it's just not the space for that. I have been in situations where there is no room at the table for me. What do? Come into the room and stand up and not be heard?
Right.
I walk away, I leave, I leave. And sometimes, unfortunately, we have to do that. We have to get up and get out of that space that does not have a room at the table for you. There's no chairs there, because that is ingrained. It's a system where those are the, I'm not talking male or alone here, I'm talking male-female situations, because you have women who buy into that misogyny.
Right.
expect you to behave that way because that's how it is.
Yeah.
So I'm saying situations like that, you know what, you walk away because your mental health. I walked away in several occasions because my mental health was more important than doing this. So several ways you can do that, Deborah, but my way of doing it really was kind of assessing the situation and seeing if I should step up and say what I need to say or step out because mentally I'm in a better place.
Right. Very important message. I guess, you know, a few more questions.
Sure.
I guess I will mention, because I have to throw this in here, like one of the ways that helped me become a leader is joining my sorority, Zeta Phi Beta, which one of my sorority sisters is from Trinidad, Anka Monroe. So I had to shout out Anka, because I'm her remix. She's my original. So
fabulous.
Is a proud Trini. So I wanted to throw that in there. What do you feel Trinis and Caribbeans can give or are capable of giving to the world right now in regard to animated content?
Voice, as in my actual voice, as in my accent as a Trini person, which I used to shy away from. So like in London, I hardly would speak because, you know, I feel like whatever we were brought up with to make us feel that we're not good enough, right? So I would hardly speak in public spaces. And I remember having an experience when my film won the Royal Television Society Award. I went to a screening for women in animation back then. And I was one of my film was one of the films being screened. And my student film was based on two artists that were creating. My student film was based on colonization. Let me just put it that way, right? But I used animation to do that. But the difference was that I used a Trinidad voice, right? Like I pulled my cousin in and I said, listen, just record this, use your voice, do not put on any accent. And it went on to the film. And the moment I did it, I was like, okay, I don't know if this is going to make sense to people because, you know, this is not a voice people hear.
Yeah.
Right? But I did it anyway because I felt I have to be authentic. I can't go and put on a voice that is not me. And of course, it went on and won the Royal Television Society Award. Nice. And in that event where it was in Trafalgar Square, very high-end type of exhibit of women in animation work, and I was like in this space like, oh my God, again, doubting yourself, should I be here? But I was there. And then a mature British woman came up to me after the film was screened, and she said, young lady, is this your film? And I said, yes, you know, yes, it was my film. She said, you know, my head was down reading a book, and when I heard that voice, I had to lift my head up to see this film because I never heard this voice before. And I tell you, Deborah, that is my mantra now. That is my mantra, you know, because you have to be authentic. If you want persons to look up, you have to be authentic. You cannot really care if people feel uncomfortable with what you're doing, with what your vision is, with what you have to be authentic. And I feel what Caribbean people bring is something unique and different in our voices, one, but also our stories, but with an understanding that our stories connect to your stories. We have a real connection with your stories. America, African Americans, and all the different aspects of that. We share the same stories. So for me, it is really about the ability to connect, to get those stories out. And I feel what Caribbean people all over, because we have Caribbean people in the diaspora also, what they bring to the table is that uniqueness with our voice, also the uniqueness with our stories. And we have a very strange sense of humor that the world has never heard. And I feel like they need to hear it, right? Because our humor is really different. So that can be integrated into stories also.
And I feel like that repetition of hearing the voice is what normalizes it and what makes it be understood, because my journey from going to college in upstate New York and hanging around the Caribbean people. And I'm just like, because where I'm from in Michigan, it's Black, white, Mexican, Arab.
Right.
And so that's where I came from. So going to upstate New York, where everybody's like from New York City and everybody has a country. Like I'm like, oh, y'all got countries. Like I'm just like, my country don't even want me, but like I'm like hanging out with the Caribbean people.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, everybody's laughing. I'm like, okay, what was the joke? Wait, I can't. But now when I'm like listening to Caribbean content, like Instagram comedians or something like that, and I'm understanding like 85 to 90% of what's going on, and they're deep in the accent, and I'm just like, okay, I've grown a lot, because from freshman year of college where I'm like, what is going on? I'm here because I'm here for the food. Yeah, I got some oxtail. But you know, through the repetition of me, you know, taking in the content and following people on social media who speak with the deep accent, like I even tried, like, because I have a Jamaican ex, where I was like, okay, don't like clean up your accent for me, and then but then he had to go back, because I'm like, I kept asking, what are you saying? And I didn't want that to be annoying for him. And so I'm like, all right, just Americanize your accent.
Yes. I think the Jamaican Caribbean accent is, I know my ex was Jamaican, so his father was raw Jamaican, and I had to get translation, and I'm from the Caribbean, you know, but I love their accent. I love our accent, you know, it's just so unique. But, you know, Deborah, you said something. You said you yourself kind of went in and you know, and for me, it's like, unapologetically, we should just speak. Why should it be that? Because we listen to everybody else, you know, we try to understand, we try to pronounce your names, we try to, you know, so therefore, you know, that's how I feel. And so far, it's been fine. Even like, for instance, the festival that we host, Animae Caribe Festival, last year we did a collaboration with big thinkers in the UK, where they were looking for sort of Caribbean content, because even they and all was saying, listen, the world is sort of ready for crazy stuff, you know, different things and different stories. And we feel that the Caribbean has so much to offer. So we did a pitch competition, and it was all to be with Caribbean. So all the different islands send their pitch deck, and then they pitched on the day of the festival. And the one that won was called PB and the Buck, and it was by a Trinidadian creator, and it is based on 2 folklore characters from the Caribbean. One is a Papa Boa, which is it's almost like based on the Greek god Pi. I don't know if you know that, but it has a top part that is a bottom part that is a horse, and the top part that is a man. Well, we have a Caribbean version to that called Papa Boa, and he takes care of the forest, and you know, so that's what he does. And Buck is some kind of little man that helps you get money, right? It's really strange, very strange. But the story they pitched was Papa Boa and Buck became friends, and then they retired from being folklore characters and doing the things that they do. And they went to live on top of a rum shop, because they now had to find rent to pay, because they retired. And the whole story is about Papa Boa's divorce from his wife, and she's with another man, and Buck. I mean, it's so crazy. But they won. They won. And guess what? He's now he now has a contract signed for animated series based on this crazy story, and it's gonna, you know, it's taken up by a production company in London. So we are saying we're willing to take those risks, because we feel, honestly, we feel like the world is ready to kind of listen now, because, you know, people are saying, well, okay, if you don't listen, we're gonna do it anyway, you know, we're gonna do it and put it on YouTube or whatever. So but it's great fun.
In what ways can the Caribbean position themselves to be competitive in a fast-changing animation industry?
So the only way we can do that is if we collaborate, because each island is too small. And when I say collaborate, I mean with the diaspora also, because we share so many similar nuances. We share so many similar stories. And Africa, for instance, when I was at a conference in Egypt, Canex in Egypt, and we shared our stories, and they absolutely the same experience we having in creating content, the challenges, the inability to raise funds, but yet we're doing it. We're still creating content. So for me, the only way for us to be successful, because I do not see the Caribbean in silos, I see the Caribbean as part of the diaspora, is for us to create the distribution channels, one, so that our work can be seen, and two, to create a digital pipeline that we can work together. So already we are doing it with the Caribbean. We are working in different islands on the same projects. And we are, I am having conversations with studios in Africa to replicate that. And hopefully we'll be able to do that in America also, That to me is the only way we can succeed at this, because that monster, the ones that own the world, that monster is such a big monster to fight, We have to find ways.
What do you hope that Black animators, Black hobbyists, people interested in animation are doing in this current landscape of like technology, YouTube, Blender, all that stuff that you either wish you could have done when you're younger or that you're doing now with your young people?
Right. So definitely the way how young people, and it's, young Black people are using social media. It's very, very interesting to my experience when I was in the industry like that, or even as a student. So I'm seeing where even content is being created because they have that platform. They are also using the software that are out there that you don't necessarily have to spend all this money on. That's very, very, that's smart, right? Because with that, you're able to get your content. I know a lot of young Black animators who are actually also working online, virtually, to make money, So, I mean, it may be small, it may be the Fiverr and the whatever else, but when you add all that up, it means that they can survive. I wish that more young Black people would see that more, because not everybody is seeing that we can actually utilize what is out there, as in what is free. You don't have to do not make your access to funding a reason for you to not do things. Because we have shown that in the Caribbean, we have shown that in Africa too, that we have to make it happen no matter what. So that's a positive. The one thing that I would say, it's not a negative. I don't want you to take this as a negative, but it's a little bit concerning. And I see it when I go to platforms like festivals, and there are young Black people around and young students who are, doing this work, is that I find often that they dive into the existing genre of storytelling, like the Disneys and the, and those stories, and feel like that is their world. Like, come on, we could create more outside of that world. And I know that it is very challenging to think outside of that, think outside of the Marvel characters, and think outside of the Spider-Verse. And I'm Spider-Verse #1 fan. I mean, I love that film. I love Peter Ramsey. I think I have a little crush on him. He's awesome, right? For what he did out here. But our young people need to understand that there is more to that world. That is a world that is established. It's established for decades. And in a way, it is keeping us in there. It is keeping us in there because we want to see Spider-Verse 2, Spider-Verse 3, Spider-Verse 4, Spider-Verse. And therefore, we're not getting out of it. So that's the one thing that I see. It's a little bit concerning, but I think we will fix that.
I feel like it's like the macro of when you're like a child. I don't think I had this experience, but like some Black artists, they are constantly drawing like white characters, and then there's this like parent or cousin like, why don't you ever draw Black characters? And it's like never a thought, because you're always seeing, at least particularly when we came up, you're always seeing white characters, so you never think to do people who look like you, and so that's like a bigger conversation of like, you're only seeing this Disney and all this stuff.
Yes,
like you can create something new. I think there was like a quote from Miles Davis. What did he say? Like, the lazy people do what we did.
Yeah.
Because he's a jazz artist, so being improvisational, like sometimes the Asians or the Europeans will copy the improvisation of the jazz artists.
Yes, and you could even bring it back to anime, Japanese animation and manga. I love it. They're beautiful. It's fabulous. But again, this is a world that is there and it's getting better and will keep getting better. But can we pull out of that and create a genre that is different to you? It's like even the festival that it was named Animae Caribe Festival, but I creolized the word, and I'm sure the Japanese will hate me for it, but I creolized the word, Animae Caribbean, Animae Caribe, so I added a little twist to it, but it's still, still connected. So I do feel that artists, designers, animators need to start to think outside the box, need to feel okay that our characters do not have to look like this thing that is already out there. It's this thing. And in order to break out of that, it's very challenging. I could tell you it's very, very challenging, because even me being in the Caribbean, that was the first time a festival came out of the Caribbean. So if I had said, oh my God, no, I can't do this. It's only Annecy in France could do this, and Kids Screen in Miami and New York when it was in New York to do this, then I would not do a festival. Because I feel that and I feel like we like that. We like at the point where we look up to these Disneys and these others so much, and we're retelling the Disney story, and we're making the Disney characters, and just regurgitating and just replicating, and I'm like, gosh, there's so much more. There's Papa Boa and Buck upstairs to run the shop. Come on.
And our characters don't have to have bean mouths. We could have lips.
Right.
What are 3 movies that you would recommend to my audience, and why? And it doesn't have to be animated movies.
Okay, so there's a film, I think you could find it, called 20 Years. It's a Cuban film. And the Cuban animator name is Joel. I think his last name is Ortega. But if you just put 20 Years Cuba, Joel, you should see it. I would recommend that film because I was there during the process when he did it in Cuba. And I saw how he made it. And it really really put things into perspective for me, because you all know Cuba is extremely, challenged. But the art in Cuba is amazing, right? And I remember seeing one of his characters that he did. So it's stop motion. So one of the characters was really tall and beautifully done. And I asked him, so, you have all these things, screws and wire frames and the headpiece and the airpiece. I said, but you all don't get to really import stuff. So, how did you get these items? And he said, I built every single thing by hand down to the screw. He had to create the screw by hand, right? So that just gave me more. But when I looked at it again, I was like, oh my God, look at that, right? So definitely. I mean, I love, and this is I shouldn't say it's on the surface one. It's just one that is out there. Black Panther. I think everybody should look at Black Panther. Any black and brown person should look at Black Panther. Some person just think it's Disney, or what was it, Disney or Sony, whichever one, and it's that. But there's some underlying stories with Black Panther that's very, very important. There's some symbolism in there that is very, very important. They also used science and semiology in there that, if you know your story and your authentic self, you'd realize what it is they were trying to see without seeing it. Very, very important. So I would say any Black person from wherever should have a look at Black Panther, the first one.
And over the years of trying to figure out, like, okay, what in real life is the vibranium, and it's like we are the vibranium.
we are, you know. And when you hear stories of this country, the Congo, and you know, there's certain elements in the Congo soil that is being used for phones right now, and it's only found in the Congo and it's in 2 other parts of the world, but the majority of it is found in the Congo, and that is why we are speaking today, is because of that.
Yeah.
Because of that is what makes up the elements in the phone and the computers. Then you realize that there's something more there. But even beyond that, like even in the cultural context of what they were saying, there were particular scenes in that film where I think the father was put into the grave, into a sort of a grave to kind of meet his father on the other side.
Yeah.
And traditionally in our Orisha religion, in our spiritual Baptist religion, there's a particular thing where they put people down in the earth for a few days, of course, being monitored so that they could do that. Yeah. And if you know, so certain things were done, and if you understand your existence and your experience as a Black person on this planet, it will be like, wow, this is like. The third one will be a very frivolous one, and it's Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo, I love.
Yeah. I
love Finding Nemo. Dory reminds me of me because I forget really, 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 really fast. Like in 2 seconds, I'll forget your name, right?
Right.
So my students call me Dory, right? Because I forget their name. After 4 years, I'm like, what's your name? But I thought that Finding Nemo told the hero's journey perfectly. So I use it to teach about the hero's journey. Yeah. And there's one particular element in the hero's journey. So you have the beginning, you have the catalyst, you have the father, you have the crossing the threshold, all these different parts of the hero's journey. But there's one particular part called the belly of the whale in the hero's journey. And that is where the character literally has to go into himself and figure out, okay, this is what my hero taught me. And he gave me this transformational sword, whatever that is. And therefore, now I'm in a situation, do I use it? Do I not use it? Do I run away? And so it's that belly of the whale moment when the character kind of gets up and does what he needs to do, right? Yeah. In Finding Nemo, it was literal. It was like quite literal. They were in the belly of the whale, and Dory was making the whale songs, trying to speak to the whale. And it was a moment of the story where they had to make a decision to get out of the whale's belly by swimming up, right? Yeah. So it is, for anybody who's teaching script writing, it's like one of the most iconic use of the hero's journey to teach persons, okay, this is when this is the catalyst, this is the moment with the belly of the whale, this is the. So that's a very sort of light-hearted one, but yeah, I would recommend that, especially, you know, persons who are teaching script writing or writing.
If someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in animation?
Oh my God. Okay. Oh my gosh. My children, I think. A lot of people don't know that I have children. I have 4 children, you know, and as I said, I'm no spring chicken. I may look it sometimes, you know. But my children, I have 4 children. I would love to cover every story for each one of them. So that's like a fantasy. I know other people won't be interested in my children. But the reason why I would say that is because it will also help women to understand that I was a hard worker. I worked my life. I had to work, as you would know, as a Black person, as a woman, as a human with this kind of funny voice. Funny accent, so many layers to ethnic, you know, differences. I had to work 10 times harder, right? What does that mean for a woman with children? What does a career mean for a woman with children? So that hard work affected my relationship with my children in the beginning because I had to work hard, and therefore the journey of they becoming adults and having to deal with that, and me having to deal with that, I think is a wonderful story that mothers should hear who are career persons, right? Because then I was able to kind of get over that with by having a conversation when they were adults. You know, they would come to me and say, Mom, I didn't like what you did. I felt abandoned when you were all over the place. And then me having to be adult enough to take that and say, I hear you. Because often parents will say, what are you talking about? You know, don't you know that I have to work hard? You know, but I had to say, I hear you. I really get that. And, you know, but I want you to understand why. And then I would explain that to them. And then I have my eldest daughter actually is on the committee for Animae Caribe Festival, which was one of the things that really took my time. So she's now on the committee. So the first year she went on the committee, which was about 10 years ago, after the festival, she came back and she said, Mom, now I understand. No. Oh my God. Now I understand why you just had to do what you do, because I just spent, you know, 6 months working on Animae Caribe Festival, and now I understand that you had to focus in and zone in and get this done. So therefore, my story with my children would allow other women who are in the same situation to see that, one, you need to have that conversation with your kid. Two, you need to hear them because they're expressing something that is real. If they're angry, if they're upset, if they're sad, you need to hear them. And three, there is a possibility to that thing becoming, you know, having a solution. It doesn't have to be that you know, you come apart, you fall apart, and you don't speak to each other. You could actually have a conversation. So my story would allow women to see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Now I have a wonderful relationship with every single one of my children because I've been able to do that as a mother, as a career, and single mother, because, you know, a lot of my life was being a single mother.
Yeah, lovely. Where can people follow you on social media?
Okay, so my most precious social media is LinkedIn, but you know that's a business sort of space. If you want to hear my story, as in what I do now, which is what I do, but also Facebook is where I tell my story about living up on the hill. I'm now living on the mountaintop. You know, no electricity, using solar. So that's a funny little story. I have a pet dog, a pet cat. I've recently gotten a pet cow that doesn't belong to me, but it's close to me. My hummingbirds. You can get all of that on Facebook. And then, because I use each social media differently, right? That's just what I. And then Instagram, you'll kind of get a mix of it. So business and what I do. LinkedIn, Facebook, you'll hear all my funny stories about island life bliss and everything. It's very, very unique platform for me there.
And I would love to thank you for allowing me to highlight you. I really appreciate it.
I would just like to say that I feel connected. You know, when we started, we talked about similar things, and I want you to know that I also appreciate what you do, and that, you know, I think platforms like these are very, very important, because often when persons like me come talking about animation, it's just about animation. Right. And I think it's important that mothers hear what I say, that young single mothers, you know, I mean, something I'd mentioned here, I got pregnant at 18. So I was a young mother. So young mothers to know that you could do this, you could get out there and be successful. And I think your platform does that. And I want to say to you that I appreciate that. And please don't stop, keep doing what you're doing. And I look forward to, you know, following you and obviously hearing other stories.
Thank you. And to everyone out there, I want you to like So I Know It's Real, and comment, tell me how you feel, subscribe to Citadel, sign up for post notifications to show your zeal, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.